Welcome back to another Dusty Console podcast.
Hey.
Today we have a new topic that we want to go over with you today. And we're going to talk about the most expensive game consoles at their release date.
Yes.
Right? So
Adjusted for inflation.
Adjusted for inflation. So we're going to talk about all those things. And it's actually a very interesting list. I got this list from tens.top, TENZ.top/top 10 expensive game consoles ever. So thank you for this website for helping us out on this. And Matt here has most of these consoles, so we're going to show them to you as we go through this.
Yep.
But let's start off with a little quiz. What do you think, adjusted for inflation, was the most expensive gaming console ever?
I'd probably go Neo-geo.
neo-geo is close. Neo-geo
Okay.
is on the list, but it's not number one. I'll tell you what it is. It is the Philips CDI. And
Yeah, that's right.
and that's one that you don't have, but maybe one day we'll get one.
Yeah, okay.
This came out in 1991.
Yep.
1991. And its original price was $700. And adjusted for inflation, $1,283.61. And they sold 1 million of them at that price.
All right.
It was a huge, huge flop.
Yep.
They were competing against Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and they did nowhere near as well as those consoles.
Absolutely not.
Not
There's
even
some
close.
very famously bad games.
They were terrible.
the Zelda, that whole relationship with that. Oh, that's a whole other topic
Yeah.
in itself there too. But
So there's a picture here of one that looks different than the one I actually knew as a child. Now, I had a friend that had one, and and you were saying something about the hardware. Tell me about the hardware of the Philips CDI.
yeah, they licensed the hardware out, so anybody could make one of these things as long as they paid them the fee. And so
As
a
long
few
as it
different
played
companies
those discs. Okay.
And it's like, okay, we can do this. Oh, you get the architecture.
Yeah.
Oh, there'll be a guaranteed market for this. It'll
Right.
be great. It wasn't great.
And it was one of the very, very first CD-based gaming systems. It might even been the first. I'm not sure. Because if they were competing with Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, Nintendo and Sega were still years away from making their first CD-based games. So this might have been the actual first CD-based.
Yeah, there were the
game.
Bit Wars a while there, and then there was the
Yeah.
big CD scramble.
Yeah.
We're like, oh my gosh, lasers!
And the one that I remember had a long, skinny controller with a joystick on it, and you had to hold it kind of like this, like almost like you would hold a sword, right? And there were buttons on top, and I think there might have been a button in the bottom, and then you used one thumb on the joystick. It was really weird.
Famously bad controller for
It
famously
was
bad
terrible.
games. Yeah.
It didn't look anything like the controllers that we use now, or even back then, which are all horizontal. This one was vertical. So dumb.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Do you have any experience with the CDI?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
Started collecting. I always had my eye out for one.
Yeah.
The ones that come up, looking around on eBay. I'm always hoping to find one in the wild that I can fix up.
Well, maybe you will someday.
Yeah.
On eBroke.
Or some forgotten thrift store in Iowa too.
All right. Number 2
Oh.
from 1993 is our very own Panasonic 3DO.
Ooh.
And this original price was $700.
Yeah.
And that was in 1993. So that's actually the same price as the Philips CDI,
Got weight to it.
except adjusted for inflation, it was 2 years later, so it actually comes out to a little less, $1,211. But $1,211 for this.
It's got some girth to it.
This
the
cost
controller that actually works.
$1,211
Yeah.
in 1993. That's ridiculous. And the games probably weren't cheap either, but they sold 2 million of them.
Yeah. This
The best-
$50 broken on eBay.
Yeah, exactly. The best-selling
Works
game was Gex, which you have,
Oh.
and one day we'll probably play it for you. But tell us about your Panasonic 3DO.
eBay fine. Yeah,
Yep.
it was like $50, $60. I was a little sad. They said it was broken, but I got it home and I put a game in there and it worked.
Did it?
Yeah, I was really well. The
you were disappointed.
The drive needed to be. I did need to bust it apart eventually and put some grease on the drive so it read the game as more reliably.
Did it come with a controller too?
It did.
At that price?
Actually, it did.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on to the next one?
Sure.
The next one is what you first guessed, which is the neo-geo.
The neo-geo AES. Important distinction.
Yes. Well, and this is from 1991.
Yep.
And its original price was $650. So, adjusted for inflation, that was $1,191 for this. And that console sold about 980,000 copies.
But had a great controller, great games.
That
we have
is
another video with
amazing.
some of the cartridges on there.
Yes.
Good clicky stuff. This is the arcade in the house.
Yes. It's absolutely an arcade.
I got this off of eBay from a guy in Dubai, of all places.
Okay.
And you can tell it's all cracked and kind of crap.
And
the electronics were okay. I
glued
this
all
together.
of this together, didn't you?
Oh my gosh, it was a hot mess.
I feel like it either fell off of a high shelf or maybe he dropped something on it.
Yeah.
And but he just wasn't willing to deal with it. So how much did you pay for that on eBay? Do you remember?
This was... What was this? This was $175.
$175 broken.
Broken.
Wow.
Yep.
That's an investment.
No guarantee.
But
as
not
you guys
with
know,
this
either.
Yeah, no.
This was another...
Did it come with the other
$80?
controller, though? The little one?
Nope.
It came with no controllers.
I ordered these out of Japan, which is where you're going to find most of these units.
Okay.
I paid for this all busted up. This is actually an American unit, which is a little bit more rare. You're better off just going to the Japanese units there too, having it modified with the Unibios.
Okay.
Talk about that in the other video as well.
Yep.
Phenomenal work. Makes these things just work great.
Yeah. What's interesting about this is it had a memory card slot.
Yep.
Now, back in those days, they didn't have memory cards, so this was kind of new to the whole gaming scene to have an actual memory card so that you could save your games and whatnot. So that's amazing.
Oh yeah.
All right, what's next? The next one.
Do I have the next one?
The next one is from 1979, and you haven't found one yet.
Oh.
Do you know what it is?
Is this the Intellivision?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
the Intellivision. The Intellivision's original price was $300, but that doesn't sound like much, except you have to go back in time a little bit more, because now we're talking about 1979. We're not talking about the 90s. So in 1979, $300 adjusted for inflation was over $1,000.
Yeah.
And they sold 3 million of them.
Really?
Yes. That's a lot of consoles.
Yeah.
And they sold 2 million almost 2 million copies of Las Vegas Poker and Blackjack.
Oh.
So we don't have that one to show you, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but we have most of the other ones.
On the screen.
We have
Make
most
one
of
appear.
the
Can we
other
edit?
ones.
Can we Photoshop one in here?
Of course we can. Yeah.
Turn the.
We'll put one on there. All right. Coming in at number 5. This is one you do have. Actually, I think you have the rest of them.
Oh.
Is from 1977. Do you know what it is?
Atari 2600?
That's the one.
Yeah.
You know your dates. Let's show the good people
It
out
was
in
ahead of
YouTube
its time,
land.
so I do not have the launch. I do have a Heavy Woody in my collection. That's actually in storage back home.
Okay.
That needs a little bit more work. This is my modded Darth Vader 2600 with the S-Video.
That's the Darth Vader one.
Yes.
That's
and
beautiful.
so this came later. It got a lot more reasonable in price, had a great library of games, and an awesome run. So this is something that's very common, something very collectible. I think will continue to go up in value despite how common it is.
Well, what I love most about this one, and
flavors?
you can see I am an Atari fan, but one of the things I love the most about this is the metal switches, these bars on the front. This is just... It's so tactile and it's so wonderful.
I wish I had my Heavy Sixer for you too.
To not have digital buttons, but to actually have these levers
Yeah.
that you can push and that have springs on them. It's just It's so beautiful.
So the Sixer has even more switches.
Yeah.
For the difficulty there too.
Nice.
And then you go later. This is the Atari 2600 Junior.
Okay.
It came out much later. If you do want to play the games and get the experience, these things
works better on these.
A dime a dozen.
Okay.
A little bit better output. A little bit harder to modify with less space in there. But also possible.
Okay.
And the native video quality is a little bit better out of that, but that's just my experience.
There's your plugs there.
That could be the age on
anyone who cares. It's not really focusing, but anyway.
All right.
So we didn't actually talk about the price. So the price of the Atari 2600 was $200. But keep in mind, this is 1977. So $200 in 1977 comes out to $843.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. And they sold... How many of those do you think they sold? So we're going up now. These are getting more and more
Well,
common.
I have 2. So at least 2.
They sold 30 million
of
these Atari 2600.
I don't have 30 million. So there's probably a few in the wild you can pick up.
There's a few out there if you guys want to get one. Okay, moving on to number 6. And I know we probably should have started with 10 and went down to 1, but we're doing it in reverse. So number 6 came out in 2005. What do you think that was?
Can I look at the pile here to cheat?
Yep. 2005.
PlayStation 3?
Yes!
Okay.
You are correct.
Oh.
When the PlayStation 3 debuted in 2005, and that is a beautiful console, by the way, and it's heavy as hell.
Yeah, this isn't a... This isn't a launch model. I have another one of those in the back there too that was backward compatible properly.
Yes.
Those are much more collectible. But this is highly functional, very cheap. This was it's $25 on eBay.
It's a beautiful
broken,
console.
But easy fix.
So we're still this is in the territory right now, guys, if you didn't know, of not worth a whole lot because it's not old enough and it's not new enough. Yeah. So if you want to start collecting classic consoles, start around the PS2, PS3 era and move forward. And then once you save the money, you can go back and buy the older stuff. But because this in 10 or 20 years is going to be worth what the neo-geos are now.
Yeah.
So in 2005, when this was released, it was $600.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah, well, adjusted
take my money, Sony. Take my money.
And it's only 2005, so that was only 14 years ago. But adjusted for inflation, you're looking at $776. So that comes in at number 6, and they sold 80 million of these units.
Oh, yeah, I got like 6 of these, so I'm a little closer.
What do you think the best-selling game was on that? I still play it today. You probably do too.
What?
They sold 21.3 million copies, and it's on all the platforms, and it's sold a lot.
Boggle.
Grand Theft Auto 5.
Oh, okay. Wow.
All right, going down to number 7.
Mm-hmm.
Released in 1995. What do you think it is?
Well, I'm screen watching now, so I know it's
the Sega
Sega
look at
Saturn.
the screen. Okay, it's the Sega Saturn. You're right. It's the Sega Saturn. And in 1995, this released at the $400 price point. So, adjusted for inflation, that's $656.
Mm-hmm.
They sold 9.26 million of these. And the best-selling game was Virtua Fighter, which sold almost 2 million copies. So... there we have the Sega Saturn here, and
good standard CD system there too.
Yeah.
It was probably a little ahead of its time there, but also probably a little too fast. It was hard to develop games for. The architecture wasn't the easiest to work with.
Really?
But it was an interesting. This is an interesting console to collect for as well.
Okay.
So good working examples are pretty easy to find. Not terribly hard to modify to play different regions. Video output in it is good to great. Definitely something worth having in the collection. But just beware. A lot of what you'll find on this system are ports that may be better. Resident Evil and things like that.
Ports, yeah.
That are going to.
They didn't have a lot of
systems.
original games for the Genesis or the Saturn. Excuse
Yeah.
me. Let me ask you something about that. What is this for? So it's a CD-based system, but it has a cartridge slot?
Expanded memory. So it has a few games that
okay.
put extra memory in there, and that would give you a little bit more hardware, specialty stuff. Yeah, like that slot on the Nintendo 64.
Right. It was just so big, I thought maybe it was for an actual cartridge-based game.
Yeah, well, they had big plans for this to expand and whatnot, and we are in the era between cartridges and CDs, so people felt a little safer having a little cartridge board on there, I guess. But the real value of this was getting the easy, fast, high-capacity storage from the CD.
On the CD, right.
And so that's what they went with. And they probably weren't wrong on that, but,
All right. The next one,
Sega.
number 8, almost done, 3 left.
Oh.
This debuted in 2003. I think you can figure out what that was.
Does the video game console?
Yes. Which one? 2013.
Xbox?
The Xbox One, yes.
The one.
You all know this, of course, but it came out for $500. Adjusted for inflation is $534. They sold 25 to 30 million.
Yeah.
And best-selling game was Halo 5 at 5 million copies.
Yeah.
So
we don't have an example of this to put on the table because it's still in production here.
Well, it's in, yes, it's all hooked up. You all know what it looks like. We'll move on to the next one.
Yeah.
The next one, actually, no more interesting than the Xbox One, is the Xbox 360. And that came out in 2005.
I do have an example of that's not in production.
So in 2005, the 360 was released at $400.
Yep.
Now, adjusted for inflation, that's $517. Still about what you would pay nowadays for a modern console, but that was 2005.
Yeah.
So, things change after 15 years. And they sold a lot of those.
Yeah.
A lot more than the Xbox One. They sold 84 million of these. It's actually one of the highest sold consoles ever.
Yeah.
At 84 million sold.
And it's a good system. This is a later Halo 3 edition.
Well, and this one has the big hard drive connected up here. Some of the newer ones had the internal only. These ones you could swap out.
Yep.
There were like 10 different generations of these.
I mean, important distinction here, too, is later generations have the HDMI out.
Yep.
Makes it easier to capture and play, all that.
A lot easier.
The early ones, you get that nice white, slowly turning beige color there too. If it's sitting in the sunlight, so
definitely.
I have a few examples of these. Very good to collect for. Obviously, as you have a huge library of these. Yep. Now, I like to pick up the games in the dollar store, find the cheap sales online, and things like that.
And they're really cheap right now. Yep. So collect as many as you can. It's always
going
to be a good console. Yep. It's always going to be a good console. And last but not least is, and you've got it over there, so you know what it is.
Process of elimination.
It's our very favorite.
The original
PlayStation from 1995. Beautiful, cute, amazingly playable.
Yes.
The very first of the controllers that we're now used to using on all of our consoles, right? But the original PlayStation from 1995, which is only a couple of years after some of these.
Yeah.
But it's miles ahead of its time in terms of the games, in terms of the controller. It sold 102 million
easy
consoles. 102 million consoles. This is the 10th most expensive console ever produced. It came out for $300, which today that would be $492. So basically, your $500 price point, which is what we're used to nowadays. Every time a new console comes out, it's always right around the $500 price point.
Yeah.
Why? Because they lose money on the consoles, and they make up all their money on the games. Mm-hmm. You know, especially nowadays when you don't need physical media. You just download it. It's a digital file. You pay the royalties to the publishers, to the game makers, and then you take the profit. You know, the new Xbox coming out is gonna be, they're gonna lose so much money on it.
Yeah,
it's gonna be a $1,500 system, a $1,500 computer, maybe more.
Yeah,
and you're gonna buy it for $500, but they're gonna make their money
hopefully
back.
just 500. We'll see.
They're gonna make their money back, and they're gonna make it back on games because that's what we do nowadays.
Well, they're
It's a little
selling
different.
infrastructure more than anything now here.
They
too.
are, yeah.
And this is a good example of like Sony making a good transition into a different medium.
This was a brilliant transition, and the numbers sold. I mean, and the game, the best-selling game, Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo sold almost 11 million copies.
Oh, really?
That's more than some of these consoles. The game itself sold 11 million. That's 10%. 10% of everybody who owned an original PlayStation had Gran Turismo.
Wow.
That's a huge number. That is
I
a
played that.
huge number. I played it too.
Yep.
But this was a beautiful foray into the CD gaming industry.
Well, an interesting factoid there too is like originally there was going to be a Nintendo PlayStation. You read some of the history of that. So
No.
yeah,
Tell me about
Nintendo approached Sony
Yeah.
to develop a CD-based add-on for, I believe it was the Super Nintendo.
Really?
And then the relationship went sour, and Sony was like,
Why don't we just make our own?
you know what? We're going to do that. And also, interesting factoid, the number one console,
Yeah.
what was that, the CDI,
Yes.
Philips CDI,
The most expensive console ever.
also a failed relationship with Nintendo.
Was it really?
That's why you have the terrible Nintendo licensed games on it.
Well, I mean, it was a complete flop.
Yes.
Because, well, so what you're saying is they tried to get in with Nintendo,
Yes.
and it didn't work. No. So they decided to make their own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Nintendo tried to get with it. Well, like we would have to get into more details.
Well,
there
see,
too,
and here's the problem.
Yeah.
The Philips, this is what boggles my mind, is that the top few on this list, not only are the prices that are adjusted for inflation are astronomical to pay for a console nowadays, but the top few were actually several $100s more than what we would pay today.
Yeah.
For a brand new console not adjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
The CDI was $700. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen a $700 console ever in our adult lives. We have never.
Oh, well, $600 for the PlayStation. You're getting there.
Which one?
The what on
This
release? No, the PlayStation 3.
The PlayStation 3. Yes, the PlayStation 3, which is also on this list, but still, adjusted for inflation, that's not much because that was...
It wasn't that long.
That was in 2000 something.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, just think about like the next console coming out and it's $1,200.
Yeah.
What do you do? Like, you already know you're going to dump so much money into the games. Can you justify $1,200 to play those games? Like,
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Well, we have fewer players on the field and less people making big gambles.
We do.
And we wish we
basically
had
only
some
have
more.
4. We basically only have 4 now.
Yeah.
It's Sony PlayStation, Xbox,
Nintendo.
PC, and Nintendo. That's it. We basically only have 4.
Yeah.
And the PC titles, let's be honest, there's very rarely a PC-only title. Like, PC is not really... It's not its own thing.
PC is a phenomenal and important catch-all.
It is.
For all those...
it is. But if it came to... If it's on any of these consoles, eventually it's going to be on PC.
Yeah.
So there's not... I mean, it's not really...
But if you're learning game development, you're probably going to do it on a PC before you're going to get a dev kit for PlayStation.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, it depends on the school you're going to.
It depends
and
on
things
what your target audience is,
exactly.
too. Don't forget about the different audiences that these You know, and it's not always accurate, but there is a, what do you call it? There's an impression that you get from these different things, right? Mm-hmm. Like Nintendo is for kids, Xbox is for casual gamers, PlayStation is for pro gamers, and PC Master Race
that cliche.
Yeah, is for the people who have the money to put $3,000 into a computer every 2 years in order to have the highest graphic quality ever. So, whether or not this is true, this is the perception. So you have to fall within the perception because, I'm sorry to say, but these companies' marketing strategies are based around perception.
Yeah.
That's how the world works. Yeah. So whether or not the PC is ever going to get that title, which it probably will, because it's going to be on Steam for $4 in 3 years, you know, we can't really include PC in this discussion because this is a discussion on consoles.
Well, yeah, because, this is a hardware standard that they stick to for that. And, you know, there's gray area with all of that stuff there too, because there's hardcore games on every system. Absolutely. There's casual games on every system.
Nowadays,
the price point, you know, you have your release date prices.
It's almost exactly the same all the time now.
You know, you can go on Craigslist and buy these things for half the price. Right. You know, probably a year or two after they're released as well. Sure. Yeah. And if you know how to build a PC, you can build one for $500 and still do some good stuff with it there too. Although you might be dumpster diving for some of that too.
Yeah, but then you have to sit there and instead of going straight into a game, you have to spend the first 2 hours trying to put all your settings to the highest possible settings that your graphics card and your processors can handle.
What? But you don't like doing that?
No.
Oh.
No. When you buy a console, when you buy a console, you put in any game for that console and it works without changing the settings.
Well, it works. Change the settings.
It works the second you play it.
I want to change the settings.
Oh, stop it.
Oh.
All right. I think this is a good place to end it. Before we start getting in a fight. Thank you so much for watching.
All right.
We'll come back with another maybe interesting podcast, or what's even more fun for everybody is more gameplay. And that we're definitely going to do. So we'll be right back with more gameplay.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Good night.